Good morning, everyone,
See.
or good afternoon, or midnight, wherever you are. We're so excited to be here. This presentation, the presenters are Camden, Benzel, and Andrea Lovestein, and Robin and Martin. So we'll get started. Thank you for joining us. And this session is being recorded.
But we can begin. So just first, an introduction, a thank you, showing our appreciation for conference, the host of this conference, for the speakers that have already brought us into such wonderful places. So we're going to be talking a little bit about our experience at the Roong Aroon School, some of which the teachers and the leadership are even in this call. So if you want even a better idea, perhaps you can ask them. So yes, just to send a moment of thanks to our co-teachers and staff and students from the school, without whom none of this learning, this education would have been possible. My name is Camden Vansel. I was a 7th and 10th grade English subject teacher at the school. I went seeking a cultural immersion and educational learning experience after my master's degree, learning with Dr. Tobin Hart there, and I got one. My first co-presenter is Andrea Lobstein, having a background steeped in yogic pedagogy and working with children. She came to Roong Aroon as a homeroom kindergarten teacher for 2 years in the English program. My other co-presenter today is Dr. Robin Ann Martin, having taught in Turkey at the graduate level for 7 years. She came to Roong Aroon as an 8th and 9th grade English subject teacher for 2 years and another year in a research position for the school. And again, together we will be sharing our love for the school through stories, research, and process. So at this point, I'll hand it over to Andrea.
Thank you, Camden. So thank you all for joining us this morning or this evening for those of you who are on the other side of the world. So we're hoping to take you through a little journey. Some of you are very familiar with Roong Aroon and are currently teachers there. And for those of you who are less familiar with the school, we hope to just give you a little peek into what Roong Aroon is like and our experience teaching and living there for 2 or 3 years. So I'm going to start by sharing a bit of a story. And in this story, I feel like it represents what Roong Aroon is all about in more ways than I could say without the story. So I'm going to share my screen and offer a little PowerPoint that is just some images of the school. There we go. And this is some audio that I recorded of my students walking to their Muay Thai class. So if you can even close your eyes and imagine students walking along the side of the pond on their way toward this big tree to practice Muay Thai. This is us meeting teacher Robin on the path, and some of their exclamations of reds and blues and whites and colors and their excitement. Robin! Muay
Muay Thai. That's why you look so beautiful in your red, white, and blue. Red, white, well, red and blue for sure. Wow. Muay Thai.
Red.
Oh, it's just KG3?
Blue.
Neil's gone today.
White.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, have a wonderful time. Have a good time at Muay Thai. How about teacher Andrea?
White and white, not red.
Okay, so I hope that brings you into the space a little bit. What Muay Thai is, I feel like I can't adequately describe it, but it's not what often comes to mind when you hear of Muay Thai, or at least that's not the way it was practiced at the school. It's not so much about putting on some boxing gloves and fighting. It's a really deep way for the students to engage with their minds and bodies, to face challenges, to face their fears, and to try and overcome them with patience and with a sense of knowing deeper who they are and what their capabilities are in the world. So I had the opportunity to walk with my 6 KG3 students to their Muay Thai class. So these are 5 and 6-year-olds, and they would attend their Muay Thai class once a week with Krubek, who is Kru meaning teacher. So Krubek was the incredible Muay Thai teacher for my students. And we walked to Muay Thai class one day. And today's activity was asking the children to walk along a rope over the water's edge. So you can see here's Krubek and some of our students, and behind her is the rope over the water that the students were going to walk along. And when I first heard this task for the students, I was enthusiastic, wonderful, a great chance for children to challenge themselves. I know, especially in the Western world, sometimes there's reservation about having children do these seemingly dangerous activities. But for me, I was totally open to this and excited for the children to try. So Krubek invited the children to line up and take turns climbing onto a big tree, which again, you can see to her side there. And from the tree, they would climb onto the rope and walk along the water. As we approached the tree, Krubek asked me to stand next to the tree and to just gently assist the students climbing onto the tree. And Krubek was in the tree, helping them get to the rope. And as we approached the tree, we realized that this tree was covered in red ants. And I don't know if you've experienced red ants before, but red ants in Thailand are like no other red ants I've experienced. Their bite is vicious and painful. And when I saw the red ants swarming over this tree, I thought to myself, okay, well, I guess we're going to have to do some other challenging activity today. Maybe we'll go to the playground or find a different tree to climb. But no, Krubek climbed up into this tree and motioned for the children to follow and start climbing in. So I was shocked, but open to this possibility and thinking to myself, all right, well, you can give it a try, but there's no way these kids are gonna climb into this tree that's covered with red ants. I sure wouldn't do it. So how are they going to do it? But to my surprise, 1, 2, 3, several children without much reservation jumped right into that tree, climbed over the ants and made it to that rope, which by the way, the rope also had red ants on it. And I was amazed, but let them keep going until it came to one student. And one of my students was very apprehensive about climbing onto this tree. So there he is, and you may not be able to see the red ants from this picture, but trust me, they are there. And he really had no idea how to get onto this tree. He He wanted to, he really wanted to get to that rope, but he was looking at those ants and he was scared, as I understood deeply, that he had this fear of getting bitten by these red ants. And at one point, as a teacher, I thought, okay, I can help him. There was a particular swarm of red ants in one section. So I picked up a leaf and was about to try and brush the red ants out of the way. And before I could do so, Krubeck said to me, wait. And she asked me not to brush the ants away. She said to me that the ants are part of nature. So reluctantly, I put the leaf down and gave my student a few more moments to try and figure out how he was going to get onto this tree, feeling like I really wanted to help. And at one point, Krubeck looked at my student and said, in Thai, but she translated to me as well. And she said to me that she told him, look at the tree, not the ants. And my breath was taken away by this really deep insight. And that did the trick, because with that, my student was able to look at the tree, and he climbed up into that tree. He found his way around the ants and onto that rope. And here he is with some peers climbing across that rope confidently. And not only did he climb across that rope once, he, along with the other students that were there that day, went across that rope at least 2, if not 3 times. And yes, it was still covered in red ants, and that did not stop them from having that experience. My breath was taken away by this whole experience. It's probably one of my deepest moments at the school, and there were many. But I had a chance to reflect and think about this experience and what it meant for my students. And as we were walking away from this experience, this little boy who struggled at first said to me as we were walking back to our classroom, today I was so brave. I looked at the tree and not the ants. And I wanted to throw my hands up and say, well, okay, my job here is done. He has realized something about himself that I wasn't going to teach him, that he had to learn from himself through this experience. And this idea that we as teachers, what are we looking at? Are we looking at the ants? Are we taking our fears and our conditionings and bringing that to our students? Or are we trying to brush the red ants away? Or are we giving them opportunities to learn for themselves, to solve problems, to face challenges? And I think to myself that if I had brushed those ants away, I might have taken away that potential for him to discover this bravery within him. But luckily, I had a teacher, Krubeck, there who helped create more space and opportunity for his ability to grow and learn. So not only did my students learn something about themselves that day, but I learned something about myself that day. And as a teacher, what it means to be present with students and to give them enough space, enough love, enough support to trust them, to learn for themselves, and to have these real experiences in nature that to me are profound and like none other. And I was so happy and I feel grateful to be able to share this story, because in more ways than I can say, it represents what Roong Aroon is about, a deeper learning that they share with students. And I will pass on to Robin.
Thank you. That's the third time I've heard that story, and I love hearing it every time. The first time, I guess I didn't hear it. I read it on your blog, but such a beautiful story. Thank you. So I'm going to share screen too. I think I will share my screen 1, and then slide it over here so I can look at the camera and the screen together. So after teaching for 2 years as an English teacher and facing quite a few struggles, learning how to be an English teacher at Roong Aroon, it wasn't easy. There were lots of struggles, but it was also really, it was wonderful when you would connect with the students each week and different students and different projects we would do. But today I'm going to talk about my 3rd year at Roong Aroon, because then I was given this really incredible opportunity to observe these classes that are called Buranakan. I observed some other classes, English classes and things, and learned a lot from those teachers. But the Buranakan classes at Roong Aroon are really special in a lot of different ways. And I was trying to get at what makes these classes so special. Why are students so engaged? All of the students across grade levels. At the end of the term, you see them presenting their Buranakan projects, and you see how much, and it's not just pride, it's something more than that. Just like they're contributing to the community in a way that feels significant to them. And I wanted to understand what was the whole curricular process that led into that. What was the learning process? And so Buranakan, first of all, it means integration. And it can refer to the integration of subjects, because this particular class does integrate social studies, language, Thai language, and science. And all 3 subjects are integrated into how they teach this. But it also refers to much more than that, and it's within a values-oriented curriculum that integrates the head, the heart, and the hands as well. And so I'm going to talk especially about a grade 6 class that I observed last fall. Fall was nice it wasn't like the autumn here in the United States. For some reason, the pandemic kind of skipped over Thailand last fall, and students were able to go in class full time for that small period, and then they went back to pandemic conditions later. So a lot of what I was learning was realizing that head, heart, and hands is so much more than just talking about elementary school. Oh yeah, we use our head. It had so much depth to it. And so when we talk about the head, what we're talking about is the acquisition of knowledge. And the sequence of concept knowledge comes from the learner's understanding, step by step, of how concepts connect. And the connection, it always starts from them and it goes outward from them to the nearest thing to them. And the teachers are always helping them to ask the right questions to go to that next step so that they get what they're doing and why they're doing it in relation to a bigger picture. So that's the head. The hands are the skills. And there are lots and lots of skills that are integrated every week. So the students are constantly learning by doing. And then the heart, in my upbringing, heart was always your emotions. But here, heart is a deeper value system and attitude, often in relation to what you're studying, as well as in relation to your peers and your teacher too. But the attitude towards something in their immediate environment is really important. Here's a bigger picture that I helped to design with the help of a elementary school administrator who was really good with graphics. Just to show that there's these phases, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and they, at Roong Aroon, all the teachers are designing their own curriculum. They build on what they've learned in the past from prior teachers, and there's this sequence of head, heart, hands through each phase of learning. It's this continual spiral of learning. And you can't see it here in this graphic too well, but there was a really detailed curriculum that they developed. They don't just go randomly into the class and hope things will turn out. They do a lot of lesson planning and a lot of talking through and seeing the value piece, the skill piece, and the academic knowledge pieces, and how to interweave those in a way that makes sense for each project that they do. So the theme that I was observing that term is the water is life theme. And the objective was to understand the origin and importance of water in relation to other natural resources affecting human lives, to make students aware of the value of using water and other natural resources. So again, there was just from one week to another, I kept thinking things would be in a lull or students would get less excited and enthused about learning. Every week something different was happening in the classroom. But one of the consistent things was these charts. They would draw mind maps and on the board, on great big pieces of paper, and work in teams. And sometimes they would get the help of teachers, and sometimes they would be working on their own. The teachers would kind of circulate around, constantly helping where they were needed, but letting the students who were more independent just keep working. And there's another. So the students were constantly collaboratively engaged. They did a lot of independent work too, but here you can see Teacher Cow 2 is explaining something to these two girls, and the other girls will look in and see, oh yeah, that's a question I have too, and they'll be paying attention. There's the level of attention in this grade 6 classroom for me was just phenomenal when they were, it wasn't attention around random things. They were on the content of the lesson. And part of it is that the students themselves are so engaged from week to week and getting to help pose the questions and getting heard in a way that when a teacher would ask a question, they would put all the answers up on the board and they would make sure all the students were being heard in that classroom. And again, it wasn't just about their random opinions and thoughts. They were exploring scientific knowledge and skills. This was an example here of the transpiration of trees, where they didn't just stay in the classroom, but numerous times during the term, they would go out onto the beautiful campus that's very, very intentionally designed around nature and explore inquiry questions all around campus, but especially just around their elementary school building, where this picture was taken. And then sometimes during the term, or at least once, most of the time they stayed focused on the water theme, going from where they were, the water coming out of their faucet, and from there, where do the pipes come from, where did it travel through, going to visit the water treatment plant, asking lots of people questions in the community who are involved in helping the water system to work as well as it does. But this was an example here of students saying, oh, we need a break. We want to do one thing a little differently tomorrow morning. And both the teachers said, oh, yeah, we can do that. That sounds like a good idea. So they sat in a circle and did a giving circle one morning. And it was something the students initiated. And it flowed really well as just a different flow right in the middle of the term. And then the most remarkable, I mean, every week I was just amazed at what was going on. But the field trip, they spent a week, all of these students here, the boys, the girls, they had different teams in charge of different aspects of the field trip. And they had to get their field trip approved by the elementary school principal before they were allowed to go on it. They had to defend what they were going to do and why. And when they finally got to go on this 2-day field trip into the mountains and into 2 or 3 hours away from Bangkok to find the source of the water, they were all day for a day and a half, completely engaged. They all arrived on time at 6 a.m. to go on this field trip, and they were engaged in the learning process all through the trip. The teachers were super busy. Even though they had guided the students to plan the trip, But then they also had all the right maps, and they were helping the students to make connections. That one place on the trip, how it connected to the other places, and that things weren't just the water system, to see it as a system. And the systematic thinking process was a really important part of the whole field trip. So they went all the way up into the mountains. They went to a huge dam. I didn't put a picture of the dam. Probably one of the largest dams in Thailand. I think there's a handful of very large dams that provide the reservoir water, and they did a lot of inquiry and questioning of the people who ran the dam. It was called the Srinanak. I have terrible pronunciation, so never mind. I won't pronounce it. But so they saw the dam where the water comes from that provides the water for most of Bangkok. But then they went beyond that, further into the mountains to where the villagers are, and the villagers who in 1980s, their lives were greatly and directly affected in not always a positive way by the dam. And this here is one of the villagers who welcomes the students and tells the story from the village perspective about the building of the dam. And this, again, she and a lot of people the students met during the term are so important to the learning process for the students, because they're meeting people in the field who are helping them to learn about the community from their own perspectives, and nurturing the student learning process along with the teachers. Let's see. Oh, and then the end of the term is called Yodnam. It's here in Ashland. Every morning I wake up and there's lots of dew on the ground, and the dew are the water drops that come from when all the water comes together, and it's then on the ground, and it's what falls out from the learning process is the dew. So the water drops. And that's what it's called. And again, I probably pronounce it terribly. The Thai language is so complex, I never quite got the hang of it. Yodnom. But every classroom across grade levels, including kindergarten and all the way to grade 9, they spend a good amount of time after this one field trip. They'll take their information they learn and they'll start to process it, and they'll make decisions together about how they're going to present that information to the parents, sometimes to other groups. But this term, by December, even though the students were back on campus because of the pandemic, the parents weren't. So everything was done by live video cam for Yodnam. And they did a whole series of, I think it lasted over an hour, of sharing things that they had learned in different formats. And they choose the format, news shows and dramas and skits and all kinds of things. But okay, so I think I'm probably going long on time, and we wanted to leave some time for questions too. So I'm going to stop and let Cam maybe move on with maybe a small wise reflection of our own.
Robin led us beautifully into our next piece of our presentation puzzle, which is in kind of designing for ourselves one of these sparks of inspiration. So a lot of Roong Aroon was based around creating projects and having students and teachers work together to find out how they're going to demonstrate their learning, about how they're going to move forward together. And this was always a great part and a scary part of the learning process because of how emergent it was, and you never really knew what would come up. You might have a direction, as I do, but I don't really have the conclusion. So the way that I adapted this over my 2 years there, brief time, was my own, that I just kind of soaked up. I like to think no one formally taught me how to do this, or if this was the correct way, or that there is a way of doing this wise reflection of finding the project. But from observing other teachers, and from learning a lot from the students I haven't already been in the school for so long. It seemed like this process was already a part of them, and that attention that Robin spoke of that she witnessed in the grade 6 class was there with my students as well. So it was always easy in class. We'll see how it goes. So the first part of this is just to find and just being curious about, what did you hear from the last presenters? So from Andrea and Robin, what were some of the things you heard? You can share, feel free to just unmute yourself and speak some things, or if you want, you can write in the chat. But what did you hear?
Hi, my name is Nahoko, and then I'm a head start preschool teacher and also primary caregiver in the Northern California rural community. And then both Dr. Robin and Andres and your presentation shocked me. And I feel a lot of cultural difference from the Thailand and here, but I have one question. The general attitude toward nature, or like toward especially toward the bugs, is that a pretty norm? Is that the kind of overall cultural thing in Thailand? Because I have this question because I was brought up in suburb, like with in Japan, and also I raise my kids in like Silicon Valley. So I really value nature. I really like bugs. I really like those connections with nature and the people. But when I came here, countryside, people don't like bugs are enemies. So I'm really struggling to write over that culture. When little kids see the little spider, less than 1 second, they step on it because it's, so so.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Nahoko. So yes, so just in kind of keeping to this process, and I just want to acknowledge what you brought up, that you were kind of inspired to notice this kind of character difference with the natural world, and how the teachers at Roong Aroon might be indifference to what you've seen here in California. But I really, for this first part, I want to stick to just what you heard from what they said. So what did you hear them say? This is like the very concrete, rather than like a feeling of it, but just what did you hear in their presentation?
Okay, I'm coming.
So I heard in the chat, someone shared meaningful experiences that went beyond common education experiences we expect to receive here in the United States, spiritual in so many ways. So you noticed like a spiritual component to it. You think about what a teacher means to you. Wow, all these values, connection, presence, joy. Teaching beyond the mind. Oh my goodness. Okay. So I love this. Okay, so I'm not used to leading this with such brilliant people who are already attuned to the values that are coming forth. I'm used to hearing, story about red ants, kindergarten, you know, just the concrete, waterfall, how to work with water. And that's usually where I would start, is just on that level. But with what we have here, we are going into this kind of deep knowledge of what maybe holistic teaching is, holistic learning is. We're almost getting to the heart of it right now. Look at the tree, not ants, not the problem, but the whole picture of things and trusting it. I'm writing some of these down so I can see them, and students are so tuned in their learning. Wow. I mean, at this point, I think it would be a good thing, maybe just, I would love to be able to break out into different rooms and to explore maybe just trust and patience in what people have experienced around these things, because it already seems like there's so much to offer. But in coming up with maybe a central point of what we're noticing. Give space, love, and support to let students learn by themselves. So let's go with this last one. So giving space, love, and support to let students learn by themselves. So let's just take that little piece. What are some things that we can do to give that, to give space, love, and support? Let's just stick with that. Space, love, and support. So now it's about finding some action that we can give that more to our students. We notice that that's a value that we want to have in our education. What can we do now to provide that space, love, and support? Pose questions.
Can I participate?
Of course.
Because what I was saying at Roong Aroon is that it wasn't about just space, love, and support without context. It was the context of learning about water and trusting that the students had the capacity to really dig in and learn deeply. But the knowledge piece was always important, and teachers were always going back to that and then giving them opportunities to use their skills in a wide variety of ways, and lots of different kinds of skills too.
Mm.
And that was part of the trust and the patience, was seeing that this piece of learning it's not decontextualized, it's always contextualized in what was being learned.
Right. Just like right now, the learning that we've had has been what you've been talking about, what you were sharing with us, and what Andrea was. I'm just trying to keep it as like a microcosm of just this brief expression that is a 50-minute Zoom experience. If there's just something that we can take away from just this simple meeting together. So one of the things that another one about good questions to lead them thinking and finding, pose questions. So how can we pose questions? Can we give an example of, is there an attitude of a type of question, or what makes a good question that leaves that space, love, and support? Lots of waiting and trusting, but with sense of direction. Relative open-ended questions with no right or wrong answers. Why and how? Yeah, so there's this sense that maybe the teacher doesn't know what the answer is when they ask the question. There's an openness to it. Observations. So now when we go back with the group, or because I imagine that will be our next place, how can we maybe model this with the rest of the conference? Teachers being a safe person that is trusted, but lets the students learn in their own way as an objective bystander. So how can we bring this good listening, this observations, this certain type of questioning to the rest of the conference that we're a part of too? Love, reverence. I mean, one thing that comes to mind is maybe just a concrete way of we're willing to ask questions in the chat box. So a lot of the times that I see in the conference, it's a lot of comments. I really appreciate this. Love the comments or what someone was saying. But is there a way that we can bring questions to the conference? Or how can we ask good questions? Connecting with the audience, deep touch between the presenters and the participants. Lead them to have questions first. What do you think about? How can we find out? Yes. So again, opening the field and then making it some kind of community movement. What can we do together to do this? Yeah, and there's something about a question that is so relational. I always find questions sometimes being written down can be so dry, but with a good question, there seems like there's an authenticity to it, a curiosity, a wondering. And that's really why I love hearing voices too. It's because the more voices you can hear, often you can hear those subtleties that a good question will have.
I don't know, I'm going to bring my voice back and hopefully that will
Please.
inspire some other voices as well. I would love to hear some other voices, but I heard it from Marnie this morning. She said something about sometimes we have to create spaces for these types of learning. And I think that's something I learned at Roong Aroon is sometimes you have to bring children to a tree that's covered in red ants. We have to create spaces, create opportunities for these types of questions, these types of deep learnings to emerge on their own. And if we bring those spaces forth, whether it's through this conference or something we do after this conference, how can we as individuals around the world help ourselves? Can we go into new and challenging places? And then can we also invite our students to do the same? And what learning will naturally emerge with our presence, with our patience to those situations?
I'm learning deeply about how important it is for a teacher to be so thoughtful and reflective. Not only after, which is we're emphasizing in our teacher education, that we need to reflect about what happened And then that will help us to how to do it. It's more of the teacher. But I see the reflective piece, tremendous time and effort that go in before the lesson. So teachers are really coming together, brainstorming, using mind maps as Robin showed the pictures, and all that. And then bring that to the students also. It's quite vulnerable and quite taking a risk. For example, in Western culture, teachers, we got to know everything, right? Or we have to have the answer. And versus we're just really authentically come together as learners and bring our curiosities and respect of each other, teachers and students side by side, and really go deeper. And I think it's creating a very safe place for students to raise questions and wonder about their learning too.
If I could jump in, I've had a recent kind of experience that relates to this. Hello again, Cam, Andrea, Robin, nice to see you. So I'm sort of trapped in America right now. I came home to be with family. So it's been a struggle to get back to Bangkok because of documents and COVID stuff. But being here, I'm also still, excuse me, teaching online, which with the time difference is crazy. And at first it just felt like kind of an impossible challenge to keep up. But one thing that actually came about from conversations with my dad was, why not just do some videos of your friends and family asking questions about Thailand, start some conversations between the students and people who are important in my life. So I've kind of strayed away from my original plan, which was becoming stressful because of not being there near the school. And it's more just turned into like conversations and questions. And, oh, Teacher Zach, what was the first thing you did when you got there? What have you done with your family? And so it's kind of created this really fun, still somewhat disconnected because it's just in line chats and stuff. But that idea of asking questions and posing something to them that gets them thinking and asking questions. And so it's made it a little bit more fun, a little bit more bearable to be stuck here for longer than I thought by creating those spaces for people in my life to ask questions to my students and vice versa. So
Thank you for sharing, Zach, and it's nice to know that you're nearby, even though I wish you luck in getting back to Thailand.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we're not too far away right now.
Yeah.
So there's this movement into something that in this process, a spark of inspiration that is generated between the teacher, the subject material, and the learners. And it just turns into, I don't know, what I would call education. It's just education. And how we come to know together and how we come to learn together. Bless you, my Dory.
Sorry.
That I found absolutely delightful. And students just would have the most brilliant ideas as to what to do with all of this new learning and be so excited about it because it wasn't the teachers, it wasn't planned that they could tell, but there was some realness that was birthed in our being together, our presence, our talking, our voices. Would Andrea or Robin like to, or anyone like to add anything before we close?
I just want to acknowledge all of the Roong Aroon teachers and administrators who joined us in this call. Yeah, beyond words for the work that you all do. And we hope that the three of us have shared a little bit of the presence of the school, which goes beyond our words for sure. And I think what Camden has helped us to look at a little bit is this idea that it's not only about maybe what we're doing, it starts with our own mind, it starts with our own heart and the perspective that we take and where we choose to focus. Are we, bring it back to my favorite story, but are we choosing to focus on the ants? Are we choosing to focus on the tree? Are we choosing to focus on fear? Are we choosing to focus on hope and love? And whether that hope and love comes through the venue of having conversations and questions with family and friends in America and sharing that with students, whether that comes in the form of taking students out into the woods, whatever form it happens to come in, I think it comes first from a place within us. And I hope that our experience, I feel like I can speak for Robin and Cam in saying our experience at Roong Aroon certainly helped us position our hearts and our minds in a place where we try to strive for that, no matter where we are in the world.